you want people to open your email. I don't necessarily recommend that your subject line has nothing to do with the body of your email, but it could, right? You could just make the subject line penguins and then the email is about selling vinyls. Nobody cares, right? Once they open it up, like you want people to open up the email and then learn what it's about.
You are now listening to the Creative Juice podcast brought to you by Entrepreneur.io.
What's up, Indies? Welcome back to the Creative Juice podcast. This is episode 266. I'm your host, Jack McCarthy. With me, as always, is my co-host, Mr. Ed Isola. And I want to kick off with a question for you, Ed. How many bad emails do you see on a daily or weekly basis? How many bad emails do you have signed up under your name and coming to your inbox?
Let's see. I just scrolled through before this episode. We will reveal why in a second, but I just scrolled through my inbox from the last week and a half, and I saw 3 good emails out of maybe 200 to 400. So a lot. Hundreds of bad emails are coming through that I just immediately archive.
That's pretty bad. It's pretty bad. So we're coming to you guys today with an episode about email marketing, and in particular, how to make email marketing more effective when you're sending to your fans. And we're going to go back to some basics here. We could spend days talking about automations and, what types of automations to send and when to send certain emails to certain fans and how to segment and all that good stuff. But really, what we want to talk about today is kind of going back to the core principles of email marketing and talking about why it's not the most intuitive. I'm sure that if you're listening, you're probably signed up to a whole bunch of different email lists out there. You probably get promotional emails from companies that you love, from artists that you love, from brands, and all sorts of people, and probably your friends and family as well. And it can be pretty tough to differentiate what makes up a great email when there's a lot of bad email being sent. So we're going to go back to some kind of core foundations to give you guys some tips to make your email marketing for your fans a bit more effective and probably demystify and make email marketing just a bit easier for you. And we thought it would be fun to kick this off by talking about first subject lines and then sharing with you guys some subject lines that came from our inboxes today that caught our attention. So let's kick off and talk about the subject line. I see this as like the first thing that most artists, bands, musicians get wrong. I'm signed up for a lot of email lists for a lot of artists, and I get a lot of emails that just go ignored by me because I don't want to open them because the subject line gives me no reason to.
Yeah, I think as we dive into this, like you said, there's really 3 main parts, but the two, one of the main parts, you have the subject line, you have the body of the email, and then you have like the footer, right? Like those are probably the 3 main parts in my opinion. And people just discredit the subject line. Like Jack just said, there's so many bad emails and so many bad subject lines and so many just like subject lines that are like, click here for blah, blah, blah. Or like, hey, Eddie, I don't know, just like basic, you know what I'm talking about. And so that's where it's like such a great opportunity to just get creative with your subject lines because you're going to only help yourself in your business. And so I think kind of the activity that I was alluding to earlier is that Jack and I went through our inboxes before this episode and we were looking for 3 subject lines that I guess spoke to us or that we thought were good. How would you describe that?
Yeah, I guess for me it was like I'm looking for subject lines that encouraged me or that made me want to open, which is really like to get into it right here, like the purpose of the subject line. And I think that this gets forgotten very easily. And that's why we get our inboxes flooded with emails with terrible subject lines, is the subject line really only has one job, and it's to sell the open. You want to use your subject line to get people to open your email. And that's really easy to neglect. And then subject lines end up trying to tell the whole story, which is really not the point. You just want to sell the open. So Ed, you want to dive into some of the email subject lines that you saw that, kind of sold the open for you?
Absolutely. And like, just to reiterate, you want people to open your email. I don't necessarily recommend that your subject line has nothing to do with the body of your email, but it could, right? You could just make the subject line penguins and then the email is about selling vinyls. Nobody cares, right? Once they open it up, like you want people to open up the email and then learn what it's about. And so I was scrolling through and I found 3 that I thought worked very nicely. The first one just said in all lowercase. All lowercase is something that sticks out to me. I don't know. I'm not quite sure why, but it's time to get your tan on with like a little dancing girl emoji. I'm just kind of like, well, I want to, it's summer, So that was the first one that I saw. It seemed more like a friend texting me or emailing me versus like fly over. This is for an airline, by the way. Instead of saying like fly now for $50, which not a bad subject line, but like it's time to get your tan on, kind of made me interested in seeing what was next. And I think that's a good kind of example of subject line of it's time to get your tan on versus fly now for $50. I know I'm going down this rabbit hole now, but it's time to get your tan on makes me want to click onto the email. Then the body of the email they could open with like, hey, for the next 24 hours, you can fly for $50, like that kind of thing. So that was my first one.
That's intriguing. Yeah, given that it's an airline, I was not expecting you to say that.
It's an Irish airline, which is weird as well, but
come get your tan on in Ireland.
Come get your tan on. They had another one that I liked too, that was summer in the city, which like same thing, all lowercase, but just like I went through the hundreds of emails and like those two really stuck out to me.
And those were both from the airline?
Yeah, they're both from the same airline, which I didn't realize till after the fact.
Interesting. Those are good ones, yeah.
And then my third one that I thought was kind of just like, I don't know why, but it felt personable. And it just said, let me introduce myself. And I guess when I read it back through, I was kind of like, oh, who wants to introduce themselves to me? Thinking it was more personal than it really was. So like I kind of clicked away after I read the rest of the body of the email because it was a sales pitch for something. But the subject line was really great in terms of getting me to open up the email.
Those are good for sure. Definitely all like curiosity inducing. And we'll get into some foundational ideas or kind of like bullet points that you can use when thinking about writing subject lines. The ones that came across my desk today that I thought were interesting were, this was from, well, I'm not going to say who they're from, not right away at least, but the first one that caught my attention was ChatGPT, will robots replace my dentist? I was like, what is that about? I clicked that one right away. Actually, that was the first email I opened this morning. That was from Quip. They sell the electric toothbrushes that come in the mail. I thought that was a really solid email. This was an email. It was a sales promotional email. It said urgent, free shipping, and soon. I thought this was just a good, kind of eye-popping, urgent. That kind of language works well to grab somebody's attention as they're scrolling. So I thought that was a pretty good one. And these two were curiosity-inducing. One was, I did this for you, ... which I thought was a pretty great kind of curiosity-driven one. And then the second one was specifically for Jack McCarthy was the subject line. Both really good curiosity drivers, and they were storytelling emails once I got into them. So you guys can probably see where we're going with this a bit when it comes to subject lines. Rather than trying to tell the whole story of what the body of your email about, or worse, what you're going to be, pitching or selling or asking fans to do, you want to use the subject line to sell the open. Just get people to open. And you can use urgency, you can use scarcity, you can use curiosity, all to do that. Urgency and scarcity comes into play when it comes to things like sales emails. If you're running a sales promotion and you're getting to the end of it, you might have a limit to how many you're selling, and you might say only 3 left or something like that in your email subject headline. If you wanted to use urgency a bit more instead of scarcity, you might say like only 24 hours left, like that one email, the one I got, urgent, free shipping, and soon. If you put a specific on that, it can be even better, like only 1 hour left, only 44 seconds left. That kind of stuff can be really specific and solid at driving, action towards the click. Those can be pretty powerful. I also think using words like reminder, action required, these can be really solid. Saying things like last chance, all of those in subject lines are kind of like power words or phrases. And like I said, also consider using scarcity, consider using urgency. Curiosity, in my opinion, is one of the biggest drivers of opens though. So ask questions, use people's names, ask things like, did you see this? Did you see this is actually a favorite of ours. We use it at the agency quite a bit.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great one. It's like, what did I see? And then like...
Or what didn't I see,
What didn't I see? Yeah, what did I miss? I'm out of the loop. But I mean, I think that's interesting because all of those kind of lead to the same thing, which is like, what we said is like the point of the subject line is to try to get people to click into the email. You don't try to sell the product or get them to stream the song immediately. And so I think that like quick tip number one about making your emails effective is have a great subject line that encourages people to click into the email. Then that brings you into probably tip number 2, which is writing the body of the email.
For sure. And if the purpose of the subject was to sell the open, the purpose of the body copy is not to sell the product, it's to sell the click. It's to get someone to take the action that you're asking them to take, which is just clicking over to the next page, clicking over to do the next thing that you want them to do. And I think this is where a lot of people fall into a trap of, trying to give all the details and turning their emails into a product page or a sales page all at once, instead of just getting people to, be excited enough to go the next, to go to the next step. And this is kind of an art, in my opinion. It's about telling a story, it's about weaving a narrative, and just at the right time, making the call to action, or calls to action plural. We'll get into that in a second, where people will then go to the next page. It's about opening loops and getting people to, kind of go a bit deeper into the story of what you're talking about. And I think that can be probably one of the most challenging things about email marketing. But I will say, I think one of the biggest mistakes that I see when it comes to body copy in email is not so much that people are overloading with information, although that definitely can be a mistake. The bigger mistake that I see is like not having enough body copy and being all graphic heavy, and essentially turning your email into a, super graphics heavy sales page email Frankenstein thing. And it's just not effective.
And I think it's important to kind of underline there, like, that's not just Jack's opinion, that it's not effective. Like, that's something that we have tested time and time again across different genres, across different artists, that like just going image heavy drives down your click rate and your conversion rate. And again, like, and I get it, right? It looks nicer sometimes to have a bunch of images all over the email, like, but if the goal of the subject line is to get people to click into the email, and the goal of the body of the email is to get people to click on that link to then go over to the page, the sales page, the streaming page, whatever, like, objectively, we've tested the fact that having more images in there decreases the number of clicks. And so, like, artistic opinion aside, or visual opinion aside, like, putting images in makes your emails perform less optimally. So I think that's, I just wanted to highlight that.
Jack's not just having a hard opinion
right
here.
Yeah, it's actually not like a controversial opinion from Jack. It's like a data-driven fact kind of thing.
For sure. And I'm not saying that there isn't a place for images in email, but the big mistake that I often see is that graphics take the place of the body copy altogether. And, it just ends up with like a big, massive graphic with like a headline, and then like, the biggest offender that I see is like multiple product photos and like, mixed message calls to action with like a bunch of things going on, leaving what it's supposed to do next in many, many cases. And that's why we see decreased click-through rates on those types of emails. And that's why, using the body copy to tell a story, to be narrative driven, and then using that to drive the click is more effective. So that's what I want you to think about when you're thinking about writing emails, is how do I tell a story? How do I tell enough about what it is that I'm trying to get my fan to do, without giving away the whole thing, without, you don't have to reveal the price, for example. You don't have to give every detail of a product, for example, on the next page. Maybe you're running a contest or a giveaway. You don't have to give all of the details of it in an email. You just have to give enough to get people excited to then click over and not have an objection to what it is that you're asking them for. Because think about it this way: if you reveal the price in your email all the time, and I'm not saying this is not black and white. There are certainly examples where you should include price, or a discount number, or whatever it might be, extra details. There are definitely instances where that's helpful and important to do. However, you want to minimize objections to the click. So you can kind of pick and choose what it is that you want to include in your email that might encourage someone to click, or exclude from your email that might discourage people from clicking. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely it does. And I think that that's really smart again to say like don't give all the info away, but give some info away. A couple other things logistically, if we're talking about the body of the email that have just popped up as Jack's been talking. The first is that, like he said, there is a place for images, just don't overdo the images. For me personally, I love to put the body of the email, like all the text, and then put an image. If it's a product or whatever, or an album, I'll put that at the bottom of the email. So here's the cover artwork, here's, a picture of the product, that kind of thing. And so we're not saying don't put images, we're just saying don't make it an entirely image heavy email where it's like 2 lines of text, 3 product images, line of text, couple more product images. Like keep things easy for the reader to understand. In terms of what you were talking about, Jack, of like how do you write and how do you put just enough into the email to make them want to click without giving away the whole, bucket of information, so to speak. Something that's always been super effective for me is just like telling a story about whatever I'm giving away or whatever, right? If it's a new song, if it's a product I'm selling, if I'm giving you a free, $100, whatever it is, like whatever my ask is, tell a story about it in the email. That's something that's always proved like a very easy starting place when I don't know what to write. Like, okay, hey, here's a new song. So anyways, like we wrote it, right? If I'm driving a new song, I'd start the email out by saying, hey, so, we've got a new song out today and it came about when I was in the van and I was doing this and that. And then so-and-so did this. And like, anyways, it's probably one of my favorite songs. There you go. At the bottom of that, you can put, if you want to listen, check it out here. Like you're helping people buy into this narrative and leading them to click on the link versus just being like, dear God, please go listen to my song and stream it. Thank you.
Out now. Yeah.
Right. I saw a really interesting video on TikTok today that was saying like, this is a little bit of a side tangent, but the same point. It was saying like, hey, a lot of artists are having a hard time right now on TikTok because they're doing what worked a year and a half ago or 2 years ago, which is just getting a clip of audio from their song, lip syncing to it, putting the lyrics on the screen, and being confused as to why it's not working. And the kind of hypothesis around why it wasn't working and what you should be doing was that you need to get a hook. You need to get a hook for these people to want to listen to the song, whether that's something like, narratively or visually. Like you have to set a hook so people want to watch, not just you sitting in your room with the lyrics on top of your head. Same idea here, right? Like you have to have the body of the email is really the hook to get people to read over. And so telling a story is a really easy, natural way that I think that whatever you're driving people towards, you have a story about. If it's a vinyl, why did you pick that color vinyl? Even if it's black and like a black vinyl, like, maybe it was the most affordable. Maybe you make up a story about how it was, your favorite antique that your grandpa used to play was a black vinyl. So you wanted to do that, right? Like you can make a story up, you can tell a story. And then the other part on top of this is like speaking in, would you call it fragments, Jack? Like not like 1 or 2 lines of text together. Like don't
Very short sentences.
Yeah, exactly. Don't put like 7 lines of text like a full paragraph. That's going to turn people off from reading it. Like tell the story, but tell it in a way that's like the first line. If I'm doing this vinyl idea, right? Like first line. When I was 10 years old, my grandpa used to play Johnny Cash's blah, blah, blah on the vinyl every day. Next line. Ever since that day, I've been a huge fan of black vinyl, right? Like, and you can go from there. But what that is like a whole paragraph about why my grandpa used to play vinyl and therefore I picked a black vinyl.
Yeah, this is such a good point to bring up, dude. Like, when it comes to writing compelling email body copy, is like formatting definitely matters. And blocky, run-on sentence type text will 100% make someone's eyes glaze over, roll back into their head, they'll die, they'll never read your emails again. Yeah, I think that's a really good point to bring up here is the formatting matters. Be concise in your sentences, break things up, leave space, use ellipses, let thoughts kind of go. And to your point about storytelling, here's an example too. This is straight from the 502s. In a recent sales promotion that we launched, we were selling limited edition vinyl that was very specifically set aside after tour. It was kind of like a tour blowout type sale. This color vinyl would never be printed again, never be pressed again, this specific variant. And we led the first announcement email of this sales promotion, not by just saying like, here's a sale. We led by talking about like post-tour blues because the guys had just gotten off of tour. And that was a much more compelling way to open a sales promotion, to be like, hey, are you guys feeling down about the tour being over? Like, we had a blast. Hope you did too. Hey, here's what we've got left over from tour, and then leading into it from there. Storytelling. You can do it in any context.
That was the point of me mentioning TikTok. I just remembered this. But it was people, when they're reading things, care about, how does this relate to me? And so, like, that email example of, hey, we're feeling down. Like, did you come see a show? Are you feeling bad too? Like, how does it relate to me? Why do I care about this? Like, people don't care about, oh, I picked an orange vinyl. Maybe, like, 5 people care. But you want to make it about, how do your fans care about this? I did have a question, since we're kind of diving in on like the body copy of the email. We talked about the images, but where do you stand in terms of hyperlinking versus URL and frequency of links inside the email?
This is the next point I was going to bring up.
Nice.
So I'm glad you mentioned it. I think that something that goes unnoticed a lot of times, but if you go back to some of the emails that maybe you've acted on in particular, you might notice that having the call to action link in the email more than once, spreading it out throughout your copy can be a really solid way to make sure that somebody doesn't miss it. Or, frankly, someone might be ready to take action within the first 3 lines. The minute that you say, like, we've got vinyl, if that's the second line of your email, they might be ready to go right there. So give them the opportunity to click. If someone has to keep reading, it's kind of like sales page psychology a little bit too. Like, you've got buttons or calls to action on your sales page in various places throughout the page. You've got one above the fold. You've got one a little bit further down after the body copy. You've got one after the testimonials and the reviews. The same thing kind of applies to email copy and body copy, and specifically where you put links for your calls to action. You want to include them in places where people are going to be most likely to have been convinced to take that next step. And for some people, that might be within a few lines. For other people, that might be at the very bottom in the PS section, So my standpoint is like, include at least two. I would say 2 to 3 is a good, kind of starting point, in my opinion, in my experience. When it comes to hyperlinked text versus raw URLs, I actually prefer both. These days, I definitely encourage having the raw URL in there at least once, because frankly, some people won't click on hyperlinked text, especially if they don't know where it's going to bring them. Like, there's been enough scams on the internet where people click on a hyperlink and then it brings them, a hyperlinked piece of text, and it brings them some whack website. So having the raw URL, in my opinion, builds a bit of trust, because if they see like the 502s.com/whatever, special offer, they might be more likely to click that. And then if they just see click here and it's highlighted in blue, not really knowing what that's going to bring that to. Now, we can assume that like your tech savvy fans will right click the hyperlink and paste it into their browser, but you can't make assumptions like that. And frankly, I've also seen, generally speaking, having the raw URL in your email body copy does increase the click-through rate. And that's been something that I've seen across multiple client accounts at IndieX. So as just a general best practice, I would say go for it. So sorry, mouthful, and another data-driven opinion from me, I guess. But yeah, that would be my position and best practice advice.
That's funny. Another data-driven fact by Jack. There you go. No, but I think that's really interesting. And I think it's a really interesting point to underline. Provide the links. This has always been my philosophy too, is like, provide the links enough time so that if someone's ready to take action, they can. One thing that's always just been annoying to me is like, if I get an email from my favorite artist and they don't link to this, like they're like, hey, we got this whole new collection. It's, all these things. They don't link to it to the bottom of the email, right? Because they do a good job with the story, but you can't actually click anything until you get to the very bottom. Sometimes you like get called away. And so if somebody's ready to take an action, I saw a course once where they're like, opening line, then put the link, because those people that want to buy, they're going to buy now, and then continue your story, and then, like you said, do it a couple more times in there. So I think they're like the main takeaway is that status quo, if I had to guess, is that you tell the story or you put the text in there and you link one time at the very bottom of the email, and that's it. And so I think like what we're both kind of agreeing with is the fact that have it in there a couple times, mix the URL and the hyperlink, and allow people to click and buy when they're ready to click and buy. The other thing that I want to add about links, I always love to hyperlink my images, especially if that's at the bottom where like you have your whole thing, then you have a picture of, again, we just did the vinyl promo, right? So we're kind of using that as a touch point, but like do the whole thing and you have a picture of the vinyl at the bottom, hyperlink that image. So if someone clicks on that image, it's taking them to the store. Like that's such an easy ask too, where people sometimes will do that. They try to zoom in. Oh, now they're going to the store. That kind of stuff is really, really smart to kind of help optimize it.
Totally. I couldn't agree more. The last portion and tip that we want to give here today is about the footer and the way you sign off your emails. And we've talked about this on the podcast before, but I still see so many artists not do this. And I think it's just such an easy opportunity to get more people taking action on your emails and doing something. And this applies to any kind of email that you're sending, whether it's a sales promotion email, whether it's, a release email, whether it's just a nurturing email and you're telling a story. And that is to make sure that you include some kind of super signature in all of your emails. And what a super signature is a footer section that has, a few different calls to action, which allows fans to take a next step with you based on where they're at in, relationship with you. Because some fans aren't ready to purchase. Some are, and they're just waiting for a deal. Others, they might want to just go the next level by engaging with you a little bit more. So you can include in your super signature a few different types of actions that fans can take. So for example, you might have a super signature that says, P.S. when you're ready, and if you want to keep in touch with me and all the things that I'm doing with my music, here's 3 ways you can do it. Number 1, you can head over to my store. We just dropped new merch for the new single, and you can check it out here. We've only got this many in stock, and then you link out to the store. Number 2, you can stream the acoustic version of the new single here. It's available on anywhere you like to stream music. And number 3 could be, come hang out with us in the, exclusive fan group over on Discord or Facebook or wherever you might have a fan group. Or maybe you've got like a group chat DM with your fans on IG. Give them a place to go where they can engage with you there. That way you've got 3 different types of calls to action going on for, a fan who's maybe at a different spot from, the other people that are reading your emails. And these are all good ways to just give someone a next step to go to, especially if there's not one explicitly laid out in the email, like a sales promotion email or a giveaway campaign or a campaign where you're driving people over to your website or to stream or whatever. These are ways to make sure that someone takes an action.
Yeah, I mean, so I feel like we've kind of gone through there, but just to reiterate, like you got the subject line, you've got the body, and then you've got the footer. And I think if you listen back through this episode and get really comfortable with the do's and don'ts of those 3 sections, you'll be able to start seeing your emails perform better, your click rates, your open rates, that kind of stuff, and see people being more excited to receive an email from you and ultimately kind of benefit your relationship with the fan, but also the effectiveness of your emails.
Yeah, well said. And if you want to get more into the nitty-gritty of email marketing and get more into the tech stuff that we didn't necessarily address, dive more into the psychology of email marketing, we've got a training inside of Indie Pro called Email Marketing for Musicians. I'll make sure we leave a link to that in the show notes. If you're not an Indie Pro member, we'd love to have you in our community where you can learn more about email marketing. Also, you can learn about how to get people on your email list so that you have people to email market to, and tons of other good music marketing stuff. So we'll make sure we leave a link to Indie Pro in the show notes. I want to share one more quick story specifically about super signatures. This came from the IndieX agency, specifically Andy, one of our account managers and strategists and marketers here at Indepreneur. He's been on the podcast plenty. I'm sure you guys have heard him talk if you are an OG to the podcast. But Andy told us a story just a couple weeks ago about how he had 5 new patrons sign up to his band as December Falls Patreon in like one day. And he was like, we didn't do anything other than send a nurturing email. And there just happened to be a call to action in the super signature about, joining them on their road to world domination and, supporting them through Patreon. And they got people signing up just because they, shared a nice story with them in an email. No heavy calls to action, just a gentle nudge towards Patreon if you're ready. And that's how they get people signing up for Patreon. No heavy like begging or anything like that. They just got, one email brought in 5 new people. Pretty crazy. And so that's another example of something that you can include in a super signature. And if that's not a reason to want to use one, then I don't know what is.
Yeah, that's awesome. I see the same thing too for myself and other clients, that like just having these things in the footer. Oh, camp feels good. Should have done that. Let me sign up. Oh, let me go buy this thing. Like, right. So having that in there, that's a really cool real life example from Andy though, of like essentially having that in place made them some form of monthly recurring income due to Patreon, which is awesome.
For sure. Exactly. And that's why those light calls to action can be so powerful, because otherwise you may not have known, or those fans, more importantly, who are ready to give that level of support may not have even known to do so. So that's how super signatures are really powerful for email marketing. I hope that this gives you guys a bit of power behind your email marketing, kind of clears up any misconceptions about what the foundational pieces of a great email really are and how you can maximize them to make your email marketing to your fans more effective. I hope you guys dig it and use these in your own music careers day to day. Get emailing. We'll see you guys next time on Creative Juice. Peace out, Indies.
Can y'all really feel us? East Coast, feel us. West Coast, feel me. Say what?